Welcome, everyone, to another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to kind of dive into something that's, I don't know, it's both historical in terms of psychoanalysis, but also really a captivating personal kind of drama.
Yeah.
Um, and that is the story of Sabina Spielrein and Carl Jung.
Wow, yeah.
And we're going to, traveling back to the early 1900s.
Okay.
Kind of the birth of psychoanalysis and all the drama and intrigue around it, especially with Jung and Freud's relationship, too.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I think it goes beyond just a simple biography of two figures in psychology.
Yeah.
This is really about the birth of a whole new way of understanding the human mind.
Yeah.
And so much of it plays out in the backdrop of Jung's own evolving relationship with Freud, the other kind of giant in the psychoanalytic movement.
Right. And we have this fascinating collection of sources to work with.
Right.
We have letters. We have personal diary entries from Spielrein herself.
Wow.
And later analyses by scholars.
Okay.
So we really can get kind of a multifaceted look.
Yeah.
Not just at their relationship, but just at the whole intellectual climate at the time.
Well, let's start by setting the scene in 1904
Okay.
at the Burkhalsli Clinic in Zurich.
Okay.
A young Sabina Spielrein, only 19 years old at the time, is admitted as a patient,
Wow.
suffering from what was then termed nervous disorders.
Okay.
And her physician, her assigned physician, is Carl Jung,
Oh.
who at this point is still relatively early in his own career.
And Spielrein's condition was described as severe.
Yeah.
I mean, her parents brought her all the way from Russia to Zurich,
Right.
hoping for a cure.
Yeah.
And that's where the story takes this dramatic turn.
Okay.
She doesn't just remain a patient.
Oh, wow.
This woman who starts as someone needing help becomes a psychoanalyst herself.
That's a pretty remarkable transformation. It
Yeah.
really speaks volumes about both her resilience and her intellect, right? To take her suffering and turn it into a source of study, to delve into the forces that are tormenting her. And this is an element that later scholars like Bruno Bettelheim picked up on. He highlights the meaning of her name, Spielrein, which translates to playing clean.
That's such an interesting observation. Like, her name itself foreshadows this theme of honesty and transparency facing your inner demons, I guess.
Right, exactly. And this theme of playing clean becomes central to understanding this very complex dynamic that unfolds between Spielrein and Jung.
Okay.
Both Jung and Freud, by the way, acknowledged in their writings and their correspondence that this unique, what we call transferential and countertransferential relationship developed between Jung and Spielrein during her treatment.
Can you explain that a little for people that aren't as familiar with the psychoanalytic terms?
Sure. So in psychoanalysis, transference is when the patient unconsciously transfers feelings and behaviors from past relationships onto the therapist.
Okay.
And countertransference is the reverse of that. It's when the therapist's own feelings and experiences influence how they interact with the patient. So in this case, with Jung and Spielrein, we see their personal histories and emotional states becoming really intertwined with the whole therapeutic process.
So it's more than just like a doctor-patient thing at this point.
Right. It definitely goes beyond the typical doctor-patient dynamic. And this is where things start to get a little ethically murky,
Yeah.
Because psychoanalysis is such a young field at the time, the boundaries of what constitutes professional conduct are still being defined.
And it just seems like such a situation ripe for misunderstanding and controversy, especially because there's this power imbalance between a doctor and his patient.
Yeah, definitely. And then to add yet another layer to this, you have Aldo Carotenuto, a prominent Jungian analyst.
Okay.
He suggests that Spielrein's family history, particularly her accounts of paternal punishment, may have resonated with Jung in a deep way,
Okay.
perhaps even triggering unresolved issues from his own past.
So his own baggage maybe was influencing the way he was approaching therapy with her.
It's certainly a possibility. And we even see hints of this in Jung's own letters to Freud, where he admits to an extreme dedication towards Spielrein.
Extreme dedication, that could mean so many things.
Exactly.
What were the boundaries? Where did the professional end and the personal begin?
And that is the question that has fascinated scholars and fueled so much speculation over the years.
Yeah, for sure. And I imagine it's a question we're going to be circling back to
Absolutely.
as we go deeper into their story.
For sure.
We left off talking about Jung admitting to this extreme dedication to Spielrein. And that's a phrase that I don't know, it just kind of hangs in the air.
It does, doesn't it?
It hints that there's something more profound, more complicated going on.
Right. And it's a phrase that has fueled endless debate and speculation about what the nature of their connection really was.
Why?
Did this dedication cross professional boundaries? Was it romantic? The sources are tantalizingly vague. They offer these glimpses into this intense emotional entanglement, but never definitively confirm a physical relationship.
It's like we're looking through a frosted window or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see shapes and outlines,
Right.
but never the complete picture. And this lack of clarity just, I don't know, it intensifies the intrigue.
Absolutely. It invites us to piece together this puzzle using the fragments that we do have. The passionate correspondence, this undeniable intellectual connection between them, the testimonies of those who knew them.
Right.
Aldo Corotenuto, who we mentioned earlier, even recounts in his writings how he was constantly being asked about whether there was a sexual relationship between them.
It's like this one question, this did they or didn't they, almost overshadows her own intellectual contributions.
It's a really valid concern, and I think it speaks to a larger issue of how women's contributions to history often get sidelined or minimized, especially in fields that are dominated by men.
Right.
It's vital to remember that Spielrein was a brilliant mind in her own right. Yeah. And her work deserves to be analyzed and appreciated independent of her connection to Jung.
Right. So let's do that. Let's shift our focus then to her intellectual contributions.
Yeah.
One of the areas where she really broke ground was her work on the destruction instinct.
Right.
Which, actually predates Freud's famous death drive by several years.
Yeah, her 1912 paper, Destruction as the Cause of Becoming, is a remarkable piece of scholarship.
Really?
In it, she argues that the drive to create is fundamentally intertwined with a drive to destroy.
Okay.
And she suggests that destruction is not simply this negative force, but it's actually a necessary component of growth and transformation.
That's pretty radical, especially for the early 20th century.
It was indeed. And it speaks to her intellectual courage, I think, that she was willing to explore such a controversial concept and challenge the conventional thinking of her time.
Yeah. Makes you wonder how this bold, forward-thinking woman was navigating this very rigid and patriarchal world of early psychoanalysis.
Well, she faced considerable challenges, no doubt.
Yeah.
And one of the most intriguing aspects of her story is that she ends up seeking analysis with Freud himself after her intense relationship with Jung kind of reaches its breaking point.
So she goes from being Jung's patient to seeking guidance from his rival Freud. I mean, talk about being caught in the crossfire.
Exactly. And this move really underscores those complex power dynamics at play.
Yeah.
Freud, in his correspondence with Spielrein, even refers to wanting to eliminate the tyrant, clearly talking about Jung.
Wow.
Which suggests that he saw her analysis as an opportunity to assert his intellectual dominance and maybe even undermine Jung's influence.
It's like a psychological chess match almost.
Yeah, it is a striking analogy.
With her as like the pawn or something.
Yeah, and it highlights that even within this field that is supposedly dedicated to objectivity and scientific inquiry, personal rivalries and power struggles are still very much present.
And amid all of this, she's trying to just, carve out her own space,
right,
develop her own ideas, make her own contributions. It's pretty impressive.
It's a testament to her strength and resilience for sure. And her personal life takes another turn when she marries a Russian physician in 1912.
Okay.
And Freud, in his letters, interprets this marriage as a sign that she's moving on from this, quote, neurotic attachment to Jung.
Almost like Freud had a really simplistic view of her emotional life.
It does reveal some of Freud's own biases and assumptions about women's lives, right?
Right.
Viewing marriage and motherhood as the ultimate fulfillment for a woman and overlooking the complexities of her intellectual and professional ambitions.
It's fascinating and also kind of sad to see how these personal dynamics, these power struggles, these assumptions are all kind of intertwined with the development of a field as important as psychoanalysis.
It's a reminder that even the most brilliant minds are products of their time.
Yeah.
Influenced by societal norms and personal biases. But despite these challenges, she never stopped pushing boundaries.
Right.
She never stopped pursuing her own intellectual path.
We know she continued to correspond with both Jung and Freud even after she got married.
Yeah.
So clearly those relationships remain significant to her.
And her correspondence offers this valuable window into her evolving thoughts and her struggles. And it's in these letters where we see her grappling with the complexities of her personal life, her intellectual pursuits, and the ever-present shadow of that relationship with Jung.
Even though she seemingly moves on with her life, she gets married, continues her work, it's like that emotional and intellectual connection she had with Jung never really faded away.
It's a profound observation, and it speaks to the lasting impact of this relationship, both personally and professionally.
Makes you wonder how she reconciled her personal feelings with her intellectual ambitions,
Yeah.
especially in a field that's as intimate and emotionally charged as psychoanalysis.
It's a question that continues to fascinate scholars and biographers, and it's one that we'll explore further as we delve into the final chapter of her life.
Okay.
A chapter marked by a pretty momentous decision that dramatically altered the course of her career
Okay.
and left this lasting mystery surrounding her legacy.
So we ended last time talking about Spielrein's marriage and all this correspondence back and forth with Jung and Freud.
Yeah.
And it really does seem like these relationships stayed important to her even as she built her own career and family.
Yeah, and it's right around this time that she makes this pretty major decision that Raymond has a huge impact on the direction of her life.
Oh. Hey.
In 1923, Spielrein chooses to return to Russia.
That's right in the middle of a crazy time for Russia. What made her decide to go back?
Well, it seems like there were a lot of things pulling her back to Russia. Family ties were definitely part of it. You know, she still had family there.
Yeah.
But there was also this exciting intellectual movement happening in the new Soviet Union.
Okay.
Psychoanalysis was starting to gain some traction there.
Yeah.
And Spielrein, as this, kind of pioneer in the field, she probably saw an opportunity to really contribute to this burgeoning movement.
So it's a homecoming, not just in a personal sense, but like in an intellectual sense, too.
Exactly.
She's going back to her roots and also stepping into this new world of psychoanalytic thought.
Yeah. But Russia in the 1920s, it was a really complicated place.
Right.
The official stance on psychoanalysis was all over the place. Sometimes it was accepted, sometimes it was totally rejected.
I bet navigating that kind of political and intellectual environment was a real challenge.
Absolutely. And that's where the historical record starts to get a little fuzzy. After she returns to Russia, Spielrein's presence in those European psychoanalytic circles, it kind of fades. We get these little glimpses of what she's up to, like we know she was involved in the Russian Psychoanalytic Society.
Right.
But the full picture of her work during those years is really tough to piece together.
It's almost like she disappears, even though we know she's still working and contributing to the field. It leaves us with so many questions.
Yeah. And it really fuels a lot of debate among scholars, like what would happen to her career if she had stayed in Europe?
Right.
Would she have gotten more recognition for her work on the destruction instinct? Would she be a bigger name in the history of psychoanalysis?
Those are good questions, and I guess we'll never really know.
It really shows how much historical circumstances can impact even the most brilliant minds.
Spielrein's life wasn't just shaped by her own intelligence and ambition.
Right.
It was also shaped by the crazy time she lived in.
Exactly.
And that choice to go back to Russia adds this layer of mystery to her story.
It makes you think about all the paths not taken, all those possibilities.
But even with all the unanswered questions and the mystery surrounding her later years, there's no doubt that Spielrein had a huge impact on psychoanalysis.
Right.
Her work on the destruction instinct, her insights into child development, her exploration of schizophrenia.
Yeah.
These are all essential contributions that people are still grappling with today.
And her story reminds us that the history of ideas isn't just some boring academic thing,
Right.
It's a story about real people with real relationships, personal struggles, and triumphs.
Yeah.
Spielrein's life was all mixed up with the lives of Jung and Freud.
Right.
And those relationships, even though they were complicated and controversial, they ended up enriching the whole field of psychoanalytic thought.
It says a lot about her strength, that she navigated all those complicated relationships, carved out her own place in a male-dominated field, and left behind a legacy that we're still talking about today.
Yeah, and maybe the biggest takeaway from all of this, from Spielrein's journey, is that we need to embrace complexity.
Yeah.
The human mind is not some easy puzzle to figure out.
Right.
It's more like this vast, constantly changing landscape. It takes courage and intellectual honesty to really explore that, to face our own darkness and understand the whole spectrum of what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And in that way, Sabina Spielrein is a real pioneer. She pushes us to keep exploring, keep asking the hard questions, and never shy away from the complexity of the human mind.
Really well said. I think this deep dive into Sabina Spielrein's life and work has been really eye-opening and given us all a lot to think about. Hopefully, it'll encourage our listeners to check out her writings, dig into the fascinating history of psychoanalysis, and think about the impact this incredible woman has had on how we understand ourselves.